So we have James Jesso here, author of The True Light of Darkness. For some B-roll, I'm going to get you to sign that for us. Thank you, my friend.
To Z-Float or to Infinity Forge?
It's technically my copy, but you can do it to Z-Float. I'll give it to them.
I'll just sign it with my initials.
I'm going to put it on the public bookshelf at Z-Float. It's like it to the center. People want to come and read it. Bye.
Z-Float.
Z-E-E. Float.
It's always difficult signing with a new pen I've never used. I feel like a 3-year-old.
Thanks, brother. Awesome. All right. So tell us a bit about what you do.
Should I say my name as well?
Yeah, actually, I'm gonna speak more directly into the mic too, because I was kind of off to the side. I remember to do that.
It doesn't matter. It's pointing my direction, so it's going to catch the echo of you talking to me. It'll
What was your question?
Should I say my name?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
So tell us a bit about what you do.
So I'm going to start with my name.
Yeah, we do jump cuts anyways.
Okay. My name is James Jesso. I am a writer and a podcast host and a public speaker focusing primarily on psychedelic culture and psychedelic medicine.
How have float tanks influenced your life?
Some of the... Let's not jump too early. Maybe let something ripen a bit before I throw it to the crowd.
Big question.
As I was establishing my career back in my early 20s or my mid-20s, I got my first opportunities to speak publicly and my first opportunities to really explore some of the ideas that my psychedelic journeys were offering me inside of a larger community, thanks to a group that ran a float center somewhat illegally out of their house, say an underground healing center. And it was the first float center in the city I lived in, and it wasn't even a real float center. And it was years and years ago. And in the midst of that, this whole community, as we were sharing ideas and refining concepts, we were all floating. All of us were floating together. And we talked about floating a lot. We talked about a lot of the experiences that came out of it, some of which were super intense. And I really believe that I am where I am today as a consequence of a community that gathered around floating and the love of floating. And so, I mean, without even saying the direct connection between floating and what I do, there's an indirect connection which, you know, in hindsight, seems absolutely essential to all that I've achieved at this time.
What's the best piece of advice that you have for new floaters?
So, in my experiences floating over the years since then and onwards, the biggest piece of advice I'd offer to someone who is a new floater is to float 3 times within a month. It seems like the first float, you don't even know what to do. You're thinking like, oh, I'm not doing this right, or I'm not relaxing. You get really wrapped up in it, or had gotten really wrapped up in it. And then in the second float, all of a sudden you're like, oh, I think I got this. Yeah, all right, sweet. And then in the third float, it's like, oh, actually, I had no idea what I was doing. Now here's something interesting. It's almost like the floating experience really there's a steep learning curve. And it takes, I think, a certain amount of repetition within a certain frame of time to enable one to become at least comfortable, if not competent, at getting comfortable with being inside of the tank.
Have you ever been afraid or felt fear in the tank? And if so, how do you overcome the darkness in the tank?
See, what's interesting is that your question, the frame of your question introduces a perspective that I already don't necessarily agree with, which is interesting. But I have been afraid in the tank, and I have faced darkness, metaphorically and literally, because that is where you are when you're in the tank. You're in darkness, and what has allowed me to pass through that exists well beyond the tank, and from the tank exists well onwards into the world that I step into, is being able to trust and being able to surrender to what's happening as a part of the process, as a part of a larger process that's much larger than my small fears, which might appear large in the moment, but are actually quite small in context to what is much greater, which is my life as a whole, and whatever it might be that life is that holds such grand complexity in our day-to-day little human lives and tiny human fears.
So you would say there's nothing to be afraid of then in the tank?
Oh, there's lots to be afraid of in the tank. It's just that none of it has anything to do with the tank. And everything, all of it, it all has to do with what's inside of your own mind. And being able to trust, knowing that the tank is a safe place, really gives a greater sense of being able to navigate the fears inside of our own minds. Because we can trust in the external context, sort of convince ourselves to some degree or another that we can just relax and maybe not the best metaphor, but float downstream.
Now, for someone that's new to this, what got you to the point of trust? You mentioned the word trust. I think that's a really good thing to think about. What got you to the point to be able to trust, or was there any point where you weren't trusting?
Do you want me to ask you so the audio stays the same?
Sure.
What got me to a point, what enables trust is...
Sure, yeah. It's just when we're doing the, because I want the question to be in the audio.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
I want the question, those are fantastic questions.
Yeah.
But I want the question to be in the audio, so we're going to do the jump cut scene.
Sure, yeah.
It would change the question askers, that's all. So what got you to the point of trusting the tank, trusting that experience?
Well, the question of what brings a person to trust anything, I believe, is as a consequence of going through a gradual process of exchange, of offering trust and receiving trustworthiness in exchange for that. And over time, this exchange of trust and trustworthiness almost builds a bridge between oneself and or maybe another person or the thing that they relate to. And as the bridge gets stronger, more vulnerability can pass through, and we can offer more trust as we can then rest in knowing that that which we trust is trustworthy and is a place that can hold our vulnerabilities. And what got me there with the tank has a lot to do with the research that I did beforehand and seeing how many other people so positively responded to their times in the tank, and the reality that I'm actually just floating in water inside of a tank and the lid's closed, and the only thing that makes it scary is the fact that it's small and it's dark, and really those are pretty inconsequential when I'm also in absolute full power to open the tank lid and get out at any time that I choose. But if I were to point to something in particular that made me or enabled me to feel more comfortable in the tank, well, psychedelics is a pretty good one. The tank, I can open the lid at any time and I'm out of the tank. Psychedelics, I don't have that opportunity. And so the tank, relative to, say, a high dose of mushrooms or a high dose of anything, or even a few lungfuls of DMT, well, the tank is easy.
So what, if you could describe the ineffable, what have you personally, sum it up, found on the other side? I know it's a big question.
If you could describe the ineffable, how would you? Well, I wouldn't. Because I couldn't.
Yeah, true. Pure being.
But you just tried.
Yeah, I guess you're right.
And possibly you nailed it.
Maybe.
But possibly you
Minimize
pie.
it.
You whipped it. You whipped and contorted it to fit a little box.
Of
And a
English.
box of 2 words.
English language.
Sure, it was English, but I mean,
Yeah, it's a box.
belong. What did you say? Total
Pure being.
Pure being. Pure in what sense? In an essentialist sense? Is there
What is
an
my definition?
essential essence? Is there an essence to what it is to be?
What is pure? What's my definition of that? What is being? How do I describe that? It's still just a box.
But it's also not actually what you're describing. It's shadows. It's shadows on the wall.
Thank you. That's good. That was the best answer. Thank you. Okay, so I'm going to jump a little bit here.
I'm actually going to go back on this because I think there is value, and it's easy to get into this very philosophical deconstructionist, like, oh, but nothing that you say could possibly even come to describe, and everything that is said there's merit in deconstructing it to the point in which it becomes absolutely meaningless. And for sure, that's very fun for me, and it's interesting for anyone who's a little heady in some sense or another. But also at the same time, I think it is of value and of merit to play with the capacity of poetry and poetic language to sort of, if not encapsulate the meaningfulness of a thing that might be ineffable, then to at least gear ever so slightly in the direction of where that thing might rest, where that thing might be, where that thing might be just ever so on the tip of your almost. And poetry can possibly do that. And also, it's fun to break down words to the point where we're all just like, oh, nothing means anything. But I think it has more merit to trust in poetry.
Thank you. That's great. That's why I love Terence McKenna. The guy was a poet. Masterful with language.
He certainly was.
What are the similarities between floating and substance? What are the similarities between floating and substance-induced altered states of consciousness in your experience?
Well, I mean, there's lots of. I think there's an unfair generalization in the question. Substance, what substance? To what extent, at what dose, and context? Really, I mean, I would compare. I could compare floating. Sometimes it would be easier for people. Certainly, I'd say would be more accurate to say that it's more like taking a nap, where you don't fully fall asleep, than it is like smoking DMT. But it's a little bit more like taking ketamine than it is like taking a nap. So I would say that the comparisons would be drifting away. And I don't even know if I want to make comparisons. I'll say that some qualities in floating that I have found in other altered states, substance-induced or otherwise, are things like being able to be immersed in a reality of my own mind, where the sense of reality, the sense of palpable, this is real, is so distinct that I don't realize it was just in my mind until I come to and go, I'm still in the tank. Wow. And then other moments where I enter into whole new ways of relating to my body and where tension is and where relaxation could be, and how certain things feel or don't feel, or what ideas come up in relationship to what sensations or lack of sensations, that I can be in a relatively clear place, very clear, not drifting off into some trance or some waking dream as I float down, as I float through excess of magnesium in my bloodstream. So I can be in this waking type state and still have these incredibly different ways of relating to what's happening inside of me, which is a fundamental characteristic of, say, microdosing psychedelics or taking psychedelics in general. Is an entirely different way of relating to your experience. And again, with floating, what makes it so interesting is that it's so easy. It's really so easy. Now, there's a steep learning curve, and then there's layers of complexity. But all it really takes is just getting in the tank, closing the lid, and just relaxing. And then there might be, things thereon that could be done in the tank that are increasingly more complex. I imagine maybe somebody's doing some like next level Merkaba activation, galactic whatever meditations in the tank, or trying to learn Spanish at an accelerated rate. But to actually just be in the tank, it's very easy, and such incredibly interesting things can come out of it.
What has been the most healing experience you found in the tank?
Well, several healing experiences. One that's already on the public record included taking psilocybin in the tank, and it's in my book, The True Light of Darkness, wherein I went on a visionary experience of encountering myself and going through waves of pain and waves of suffering, and encountering myself as I'm gonna stop there because I want people to read the book. But it's like a moment where you're like, oh, what's about to happen next? So if I give it away, it ruins that moment. But some other things that have happened that have been really healing. I have many times come into places of deep grief when I've been in the tank. And I don't think that I'm speaking just for myself, but I can currently only speak for myself to say that as being brought up in modern society as a man, I really learned how to not feel things that aren't rage or lust or dependency, but to feel things that are vulnerable, to feel something so blessed and so real as grief. This can be quite a challenge, and I feel I've been offered the beautiful opportunity in the tanks more than once to come in contact with that. And not necessarily sorrow, but sorrow has been there. But to quote one of my favorite teachers, Stephen Jenkinson, or to paraphrase, there's as much joy as there is sorrow and grief. And I've many times stumbled into moments of extreme gratitude for even just this seemingly easy to forget gift of just being alive and having people in my life that I care about and that they're alive. I've discovered that in the tank. I've discovered that if I slow down enough so and stop thinking about all the goddamn things I need to do, that kind of stuff comes up. And those kinds of experiences, tank or otherwise, I wouldn't trade them for anything. It's the chocolate, man. I told you this while I had
it. What's in the chocolate?
Theobromine, phenethylamines, just some good ancient, iron gold, yeah.
Why is objective scientific psychedelic research important?
Jeez, oh my God, that's not a one-answer question, my friend. What route do you want me to take? Let me riff off that.
The next question is sort of similar, and it might be more directly to the MAPS thing, which is, what is MAPS doing, and why should people support them?
I think you should ask me that first question again.
Sure.
And let me deconstruct why the question isn't best, because the fact that
the first question?
Yeah, the fact that the question needs clarification is an answer to the question. Beautiful. That positively expands the frame in which, because that's a question somebody would ask.
Yeah.
That's a very reasonable, important question that someone would be thinking, right? So
let me ask it again. Why is objective scientific psychedelic research important?
Well, that's not a simple answer. That's not even a simple question. It seems simple, but it's very complex because there's a lot of different science that's happening, and there's a lot of different science possibilities. Obviously, right off the bat, let's say mental health research. Excellent. You're telling me that you found a substance, MDMA, for example, that can help cure PTSD. Or I don't know if they're using that word, so I'm representative of my own thing. I don't have any.
They are using cure.
Okay, so that can cure something that most people suffer with for the rest of their lives, which oftentimes is much shorter than it would have been naturally because they end up killing themselves because of this trauma. And they found something that can heal that. I mean, medically. Medical research on MDMA alone is going to open massive, massive doorways for a lot of people who are otherwise stuck. So then let's jump over to psilocybin, smoking cessation. People get stuck on nicotine. I'm on day 5 right now of not vaping nicotine. And if you brought it in the room right now, I might tear through you like a freight train to get to it. And I feel like I'm a pretty competent guy. Nicotine is an incredibly seductive molecule, and the dependency is extreme. And people will invest their entire lives quitting and smoking, find a substance that helps quit by nature of a subjective change in their relationship to how it feels to breathe. I mean, the implications of that beyond smoking are incredible. Same substance, depression. That people end up coming out the other side of a psilocybin experience positively impacted in a way where their depression melts away. How about psilocybin for end-stage life anxiety? We live in a society now that is so age-phobic and so death-phobic that people in their middle age try to stay in their middle age, never actually facing their aging until it's 5 minutes to midnight, and all of a sudden, here you are. As a culture, we don't talk about death. We don't put it in a place of real consideration. We don't put dying in a place of real consideration. We fight against it like it is the ultimate battle. And when you fight dying, and you inevitably go the way that you were meant to go, which is to die, what happens? You're now a loser. We live in a society where our relationship to death and dying, which is also a relationship to our dead and to our not yet born, is so dysfunctional that people are absolutely wrapped with anxiety. They're absolutely obliterated by this anxiety to the point where people are so sedated at the end of life, they're not even there to experience their birthright, which is to die. Now, we don't like to think of it that way, but that is what it is. It's our birthright. It's what gives our life meaning, the fact that it ends. And sorry, but for the most part, we're not going to fix that. We're not going to fix that in distraction, but we got it. We're not going to fix that at the end of life. There's no counseling that supports it, that helps people get through that. So they end up on all these antidepressants, and then all of a sudden, here comes psilocybin. And it can radically transform a dying person's relationship to death to the point wherein they can die in a way that leaves behind them a meaning that informs a different relationship to death for those that follow. Let's just say psilocybin helps take away anxiety at the end of life. Wow, that's amazing. Let's say that lack of anxiety shows people around that dying person that there is a way to die that does not include extensive anxiety, thrashing, and being sedated to the point where you're not even there in your final moments. I mean, that's a pretty big gift. And it might not be psilocybin that does it, but there's another thing. Well, now we haven't even talked about neuropharmacology. We haven't even talked about figuring out how the brain renders consciousness or human consciousness. or how our different brain networks and systems interact with each other in a way that enables a variety of experiential content to emerge, let alone now being able to find objective evidence to the theories of the subconscious and unconscious mind. Possibly even, now let's dip into that blend between neuropharmacology and philosophy, and then all of a sudden we're in this situation where we have an external physical agent molecules that with the machines and with all that material tech, very intellectual shit that we're so fucking addicted to, is supporting us to really deeply considering what is the nature of consciousness and existence, and what is our interconnection with the transpersonal aspects of the realms that we once called mythology. Now we're able to explore in a lab thanks to a little molecule inside of a little capsule that for some reason is still illegal, but hopefully won't be illegal for very long.
Again, fantastic answer. The reason I wanted to go to the second one is because I know the time. That was a big question, and you could keep going for a very long period of time. Why is objective scientific research about?
I also want to give huge shout out to Stephen Jenkinson for some of those things on death. I'm really learning a lot from him, and I don't pretend to speak for him.
Yeah.
By any means.
I'm sure he'd be happy with your paraphrase.
Well, I don't know, but I deeply appreciate what I've learned from him as a consequence of engaging what he has to say about dying.
Yeah, that was fantastic. I just learned much, actually, about death and dying, so thank you. I want to get more to the questions about maps, because I do want to have some short clips. It is 9 p.m. now.
Yeah.
I do have want to cut some clips at the end of this video, specifically for getting people to come in and do the maps. Gift card purchases. So, do you understand the concept? Like I explained to you how it's working. We can go to the maps.ca and,
I'll get you to repeat that in a second, but why don't you ask me what MAPS is doing, and then I'll talk about that.
Perfect. Yes. So, what is MAPS doing for post-traumatic stress disorder research?
Well, MAPS is doing a lot for post-traumatic stress disorder research, in particular MDMA, which, as mentioned earlier in the interview, is something that is leaning towards curing people of post-traumatic stress disorder. The same people who, they're for example, veterans, who their brothers and sisters in the military have ended up taking their life as a consequence of the very same malady that they're being cured of as a consequence of this medicine. And if it wasn't for MAPS, the idea that MDMA could be taken in psychotherapy or taken in a therapeutic context officially would not exist. If it wasn't for MAPS, we wouldn't be there. And dare I say that if it wasn't for MAPS, we wouldn't be on the verge of accessing a medicine that can save hundreds, if not thousands, tens of thousands of lives over the years to come as a consequence of saving them from post-traumatic stress disorder. They have been the fundamental agent behind this emergence of research with MDMA, and have been a primary node for psychedelic research in general since they began, I think 30 years ago or something. Don't quote me on that, but several years ago, with the very intention of bringing these things back, knowing their value and working very hard for a very long time on behalf of all of us. And I don't think I've ever said officially how much I appreciate that, but I really appreciate that on behalf of everyone, including the people not yet born. MAPS is doing very, very good work.
I agree. How can people, what are one of the ways people can support MAPS right now in the GTA and the Hamilton area?
Well, outside of directly just giving them money, which I'm sure they would happily accept, or buying merch. Currently, you can buy some gift cards here for the Z Float, who have taken me in here to have this opportunity to talk. And by buying these gift cards, you can be, how much, what's the portion?
It's 15% of all of the proceeds for the month of July.
So, yeah, so you can come here in Hamilton to Z Float, and when you buy gift cards, 15% of the proceeds over the entire month of July is going to be going to support MAPS.
Awesome.
I'm sure you can like cut that in so it sounds right.
For sure we will, and we're also going to put like a direct them to on the green screen, like how to. I think that's it. I have a question here. It was a big one, and I know you could go on about it.
Maybe get to the stuff. Did we have all the pieces?
This one's in pink, and I just would like to hear the answer because so many of the answers have been so good. So I'm just going to ask it anyway.
It's 9 o'clock. How do you feel?
Ask me the question, man.
Sounds good.
You got me in the hot seat. Like I'm actually getting a bit hot.
Yeah, this is great. No, this is really good, man. I see why you've written books. What are some of the big stigmas about psychedelics, and how can we overcome them as a culture?
Well, I'd say some of the biggest stigmas around psychedelics have to do with who psychedelic users are and what type of lifestyles they live. And understandably so, there's some merit to all stereotypes, because if there weren't examples of those stereotypes, they wouldn't need to exist. However, it's a very small portion of the population. I mean, me, to the average viewer, I might appear to look like a drug user as a consequence of me being one, I suppose, and choosing to dress a certain way. But there's multitudes of people that take psychedelics and putting MDMA in there that live entirely normal, what would we consider to be very normal jobs. And they've been positively impacted by them. Their whole lives positively transformed as a consequence of experiencing what's on the other side of ingesting these molecules. And yet they cannot share it with anyone around them out of fear of the consequence of ignorance. And that's just one part of it. Really, that's just one stigma. There's all sorts of stigmas like that are ultimately myths, like mushrooms make your stomach bleed, which, I mean, one consequence there is if some 15-year-old's never been given real information, they've only gotten dare to just say no, and they think that mushrooms make your stomach bleed, and they take some mushrooms and they get some indigestion, all of a sudden they're having a fucking panic attack. Well, there's a consequence of the stigma right there. It's also a consequence of ignorance. Truly, when it comes to psychedelics, in particular, we're talking about the classical psychedelics, the ones that are primarily work on the serotonin 5-HT2A receptors, whatever, that's some big words, but sort of the classic ones, mushrooms, mescaline, LSD, these types of things, they're safe. LSD and mushrooms, they're so safe. Like there's no toxic dose, I believe, that they found. When I did my research, the LD50, based on a 60 kilogram rat, this is where that amount of mushrooms would translate to 50% of the test subjects dying, the rats. For 60 kilogram rats, the math added up to eating something like 1,600 grams of mushrooms in one go in order to kill a 60 kilogram rat. Well, I'm a 72, 73 kilogram higher primate, and I struggle to get down more than 4 or 5 grams. So I don't reckon that's a danger. But there is a serious danger with psychedelics, a very serious danger that the consequence of which results in lives ruined, families ruined, lives lost. And it's ignorance. And it's ignorance as a consequence of stigma. And how can we resolve that ignorance? Well, first and foremost, we can start talking about it. We can start talking about it openly and unapologetically. We can also start talking about it intelligently. There's lots of people talking some bullshit like, well, fucking mushrooms, man, it's so great. And they are. And fucking mushrooms, they're so great. But we need good, intelligent, reasonable, mature dialogue around these things. And it needs to be unapologetic. And it needs to not try to conform to any particular ideology. And it needs to be clear and truthful and fact-based. And poetic and beautiful. But that is the antidote to ignorance. And as a consequence, that would be the antidote to the danger of psychedelics, which is the stigma around psychedelics.
That's fantastic, man. Thank you. I need to hear that too. I wanted to ask a question. I think that was for me.
Yep.
That question was for me. This is the only one on the page that was at a different place.
Well, what you might not have realized is that it was actually for everyone.
Yeah. Well, I guess I've been identifying with everyone I introduced these to. So.
How transpersonal of you. Have you been eating mushrooms?
I have been, yes. Let's have a mature dialogue about it. Openly. Actually, I'm going to a poetry slam next week. My girlfriend's a poet, and I've been thinking of writing one myself. So maybe I'll get up there on stage and do one. I've only done one so far, and it's about how I create my own reality. So, a great follow-up.
Mm.
Thanks, man. That was really, really good.
You're welcome. Any other questions?
No, that was all of them. I think we covered all our bases.
You're recording over there?
Yeah.
Hey, yo, thanks for watching this behind the scenes. Definitely, I'll make a link in the description to where you could find the refined version of this talk over on the Z Float channel or the Maps channel or wherever the channel might be. Thanks for tuning in.
That was awesome.
Okay, bye.
Thank you.
Wow.
That was great. Do we need him to do any things for like brochure edit?
I mean,
Thank you for that.
Yeah.
I would say let's take a picture of him with his book so that we can post that to our social media feed for multiple traction for him, and maybe a link to the Amazon page or whatever you make most money through, whatever channel.
Shit, I had some dandruff. I hope you can edit that out in
Oh,
post-production.
Comes with ponytail territory, I assume.
Yeah, it does. Comes with the Caucasian Scandinavian situation.